When your dog growls at a doorway no one's standing in, when your cat won't go near a certain room, or your parrot starts repeating words you've never said, you don't just ignore it, you wonder what they're seeing, and more importantly, why you can't. These are 3 true stories of pets reacting to something no one else saw. And what happens next? You'll never forget. I live in a pretty quiet part of Pennsylvania. Not quite rural, not quite suburban, just a sleepy stretch of land with a few houses, long winding roads, and more deer than people. I'm 27, single, work from home as a freelance designer. Life's been pretty uneventful lately. Most days it's just me and my German Shepherd Duke. He's 4 now, big, loyal, well-trained, almost too smart sometimes. You know the kind of dog that looks at you like he knows exactly what you're thinking? Yeah, that's Duke. This all happened a couple of winters ago. I had just moved into a rental house at the edge of a wooded area, about 30 minutes from the nearest town. The house wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, slightly outdated kitchen, creaky floors, but it was cheap. And honestly, after the year I'd had, I was fine with the quiet. The thing is, I didn't choose the quiet. It sort of happened to me. I had just gotten out of a long relationship that ended badly. The kind that leaves you drained and emotionally scrambled. Add to that some family tension and a work burnout that crept up on me out of nowhere. And yeah, I needed out of the city, out of all of it. So I packed up my things, found this weird little rental online, and moved. No neighbors within shouting distance. Backyard opened up into woods, no traffic, no noise, just me and Duke. It was around mid-January. Snow had been on the ground for days, and the temperature didn't seem interested in moving above freezing. Every night around 10 or so, I'd take Duke out back for one last bathroom break before bed. He had this little patch of yard he always went to, like clockwork. That night, he didn't move. I opened the back door, let the cold hit me in the face, and gave him the usual command. "Go ahead, Duke." He stepped out, walked about 6 feet into the yard, and stopped. He didn't sniff the ground, didn't lift his leg, just stood there. His ears were straight up, tail stiff, body frozen, staring straight into the woods. I followed his gaze but saw nothing, just black trees and snow. "Come on," I called. "Hurry up!" He didn't budge. Now Duke isn't a skittish dog. He's handled storms, fireworks, even a coyote once without flinching. But that night, he looked like he was trying to decide if he should bolt or attack. Finally, I went out in my slippers, grabbed his collar, and guided him back inside. The whole way, he kept twisting his neck to look behind us. That's when I noticed something else. He was trembling, not from the cold, from something else. Once inside, I dried him off, locked the back door, and figured he must have smelled a wild animal, maybe a fox or something deeper in the woods. I poured myself a drink and sat down to watch TV, but Duke wouldn't relax. He paced the living room in slow, tight circles. He'd stop and look toward the hallway, ears flicking like he was hearing something I wasn't. A couple of times he even stood up on his hind legs and looked out the front window. He never does that. I tried distracting him with his toy. No interest. His favorite treats? Nothing. He just kept pacing. I started feeling uneasy myself, like when someone stares at you from behind and you don't know why, but your whole body tenses up. That's the kind of tension in the room. By 11:30, I decided to head to bed. Usually, Duke follows me and curls up on this old gray blanket next to my bed. That night, he stayed in the hallway, facing my bedroom door. I kept calling him, "Come on, boy, let's go to sleep." But he just sat there, staring. I finally gave up and got into bed, but I couldn't sleep, not really. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear a low growl, barely audible, coming from the hallway, and every time I looked, Duke was in the same position. Still, alert. Then, came the knocks. 3 slow, solid knocks on the back door. Not the front, not a window. The back door, the one that leads straight out into the woods. I sat up so fast I got lightheaded. I wasn't dreaming. I was fully awake. And I swear to God, I heard those knocks again. Same rhythm, same weight behind them. Duke bolted down the hallway, barking so loudly I thought he was going to break the window with his voice alone. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and followed him to the kitchen. The porch light was on, but no one was there. I cracked the blinds and looked out. Snow, darkness, woods, no footprints, but then I noticed Duke. He wasn't barking at the door anymore. He had turned toward the basement, and he was growling. I froze. Let me explain. This house had a basement I never used. The stairs creaked horribly, and I didn't really need the space. The landlord had told me it was just old storage down there. Some junk furniture, boxes, maybe some spiders. But Duke was locked in now, nose pointed right at the door like he was tracking a scent. Then I heard it. From the basement. Breathing. Not like a pipe hissing. Not wind. Breathing. Slow, deliberate, human. I backed away. Every inch of me wanted to run out of the house barefoot into the snow, but I grabbed my phone, locked myself in the bedroom, and called the police. They said it might take 15 to 20 minutes. I grabbed a knife from my nightstand drawer, sat with my back to the wall. Duke sat at the door, still growling. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The breathing stopped, but right before the police arrived, Duke barked again. This sharp, violent sound like he was warning something to leave. When the officers finally got there, I explained what happened. They searched the basement top to bottom. No one there. No signs of forced entry. No tracks in the snow. Nothing. They said maybe I was half asleep. Maybe I imagined the knocks, that the breathing was old pipes. Classic explanations. But the next morning, I went into the basement for the first time. And I found something. Right at the base of the stairs, half buried under some crumpled cardboard boxes, was a single glove. A large, heavy-duty black glove, wet with melted snow. The police came back, bagged it, took a report, but nothing ever came of it. No fingerprints, no updates. I changed the locks, bought cameras, slept with a light on for weeks, but the thing that never changed was Duke. Every single night after that, he refused to go near the basement door, wouldn't walk past it, wouldn't eat near it, just avoided it. And sometimes, when I'm watching TV late, he'll suddenly lift his head and stare at that door for a solid minute. Like he's listening. I moved out 6 months later. To this day, I still don't know what Duke saw or who was knocking, but I'm 100% sure of one thing. My dog saved me from whatever was waiting down there. If a dog growls at an empty room, maybe it's not so empty. But our next story isn't about barking. It's about a cat that refused to step into one room, and what it knew will haunt you. I've always been more of a dog person, but after my divorce, the house felt dead quiet. So I got a cat. Her name's Juniper. Black, short-haired, totally unbothered by anything. You know the type of cat that acts like they own the place? That's her. I live alone now, just outside Salem, Massachusetts, in a house that's been in my family for a couple generations. Nothing fancy. White siding, steep roof, small front porch. I inherited it after my uncle passed, and honestly, it felt like a fresh start at the time. For the most part, the house has been great. It's got character, creaky stairs, a drafty attic, but I always liked that old New England vibe. Juniper seemed to like it too. She had free reign over the place from the first day, except for one room. There's this small guest room upstairs. It's nothing special. Twin bed, old dresser, dusty bookshelf. But for whatever reason, Juniper would not go in there. At first I thought she was just being weird. She'd walk right up to the doorway, pause, and then back away. If I tried to pick her up and carry her in, she'd squirm out of my arms before I even crossed the threshold. Sometimes she'd just sit outside the room and stare at it, her ears flat, like she was waiting for something to move. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe there was a weird smell in there, or she'd heard mice in the wall. But the house had been empty for months before I moved in. It had passed inspection. No signs of pests. It was probably 3 weeks after I moved in that things started getting strange. It started with small stuff. The guest room door would be cracked open in the morning when I swore I left it closed the night before. A picture frame fell off the wall in there for no reason. I thought maybe the old floorboards were shifting or something. One night, I was brushing my teeth upstairs when I heard something shift in the guest room. It wasn't loud, just the sound of movement, like fabric sliding against fabric. Juniper bolted from the hallway and hid behind the couch downstairs. That was new. I went to the room, opened the door, turned on the light. Nothing. Bed looked undisturbed. Dresser closed. Windows locked. But the smell? It was subtle, almost like old perfume, faint, floral, and dusty. The kind of scent that reminds you of a stranger's house you visited once as a kid. I left the door open and went to bed. The next morning, the door was closed. Not just closed, locked from the inside. Now that made no sense. The lock on that doorknob was one of those old push-button types. There's no way it could just lock itself. I had to get a butter knife and pop it open. Juniper refused to go upstairs for 2 full days after that. One night, I was in bed reading, around 1 a.m. when I heard it again. Movement. Only this time, it was more than fabric. It sounded like footsteps, slow, dragging, like someone walking across the guest room floor in socks. Then, a knock. 3 soft knocks, from inside that room. I didn't move. I just sat up in bed, heart hammering in my chest, listening. Juniper started growling from the hallway. Cats don't really growl like dogs do, not unless they're really freaked out. This wasn't her usual annoyed hiss. This was low and primal. She crept toward the room and stopped a few feet away, tail puffed out, body arched like she was ready to pounce, but her back legs were shaking. She let out a horrible guttural yowl and bolted back down the stairs like something had lunged at her. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check the room. Again, empty. But the closet door, it was wide open, and I swear I had never opened that closet. Inside were just old boxes, some of my uncle's junk, and an old, full-length mirror with a crack running down the center. The mirror was facing the wall. I didn't like that. I turned it around to face outward, just to see. And the moment I did, the light bulb flickered and went out. I backed out of the room and closed the door. That was the last time I stepped foot in there at night. A few days later, I had a friend over. We were drinking in the living room when Juniper suddenly sat up from her nap and started hissing, loudly. Not at us, but toward the staircase. My friend looked at me and laughed. "Dude, what's up with your cat?" Before I could answer, we both heard it. Thump. A single loud thud from upstairs, like something heavy fell to the floor. Juniper ran behind the fridge and didn't come out the rest of the night. I told my friend it was probably an old box falling over, but my voice was shaking. I didn't believe it myself. He asked if I wanted him to check it out, but I said no. I told him not to go up there. I don't know why. I just felt like we weren't supposed to. Weeks went by. I kept the door closed. Juniper avoided it entirely. She'd even walk in a big arc around that side of the hallway. Then came the final night. I woke up around 3:15 a.m. to the sound of Juniper screaming. Not meowing, screaming. I leapt out of bed and found her in the corner of the hallway outside my door, completely puffed up, ears pinned, growling at the guest room door, and then the door opened. By itself. It didn't swing slowly or creak like in movies. It just clicked and opened about 6 inches. Juniper lost it. She was hissing, swatting at the air, backing away like something was walking toward her. I turned on every light in the house, grabbed her, and locked us both in the bathroom. I sat on the floor with her for over an hour while she growled toward the door. Eventually, I got the courage to walk back out. I checked the room. Nothing. But the mirror? It had been moved again, facing the wall. I don't remember turning it back around. That morning I called a local animal rescue center and asked if they'd temporarily foster Juniper while I sorted things out. I just needed her somewhere safe. While packing up some stuff to take her over, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the back of the old mirror, written faintly in chalk, were 2 words, "Don't look." I moved out of the house a week later, put it up for sale. I never went back upstairs again after that night. Juniper's been with me ever since, in a new apartment across town. She's relaxed, playful, back to her normal self. But the weirdest part? She still avoids doors. Any closed door, she just sits in front of and waits, watching, like she's making sure it stays closed. And sometimes, late at night, I catch her staring at the closet in my bedroom. I asked the landlord the other day, just out of curiosity, if anyone had ever reported anything strange here before. He said no, but he did say something else that stuck with me. Apparently, the last tenant had a cat too. They found it locked inside the closet the day she moved out. When a cat senses something wrong, you listen. But what if the warning doesn't come from a bark or a hiss? What if it speaks? This next pet didn't react. It repeated what it heard, from inside the walls. I used to think parrots were annoying, all the squawking, the constant noise, the mimicry, but then I inherited one. Her name's Olive. Bright green feathers, yellow around the eyes, and a sharp voice that could imitate a microwave beep perfectly. She had belonged to my grandmother, who passed suddenly and left her to me in her will. I wasn't planning on owning a bird, let alone that bird, but something about it felt like keeping a piece of her alive. So Olive came to live with me. This was 2 years ago. I had just moved into a small rental duplex just outside Tucson. The place was old, single-story, with plaster walls and floor vents that made all kinds of noise when the heat kicked on. A little run down, but manageable. The first week with Olive was rough. She wouldn't stop screeching. I figured she was stressed from the move, new smells, new sounds. I placed her cage in the corner of the living room where she could see me at all times. She seemed to calm down a bit after that, but by the end of the second week, she started doing something weird. She'd look directly at one of the vents on the wall and whisper. Not mimic words she'd heard from me or my grandmother, but new phrases, quiet things, things I hadn't taught her. The first time it happened, it was around 11 p.m. I was up watching TV. Olive was asleep in her cage with her feathers puffed up, until she suddenly stood tall, stared at the vent, and whispered, "Let me out." I muted the TV and looked at her. She didn't repeat it, just kept staring at the vent, unmoving. I laughed it off at first. She was probably repeating something from the radio or a commercial. But then it happened again the next night. Different phrase this time. "Who's in there?" I said. "What the hell, Olive?" Out loud, trying to shake it off like it was just creepy coincidence. Then she said it again. "Who's in there?" Clear as day, repeating it, looking straight at the vent. That's when I started getting uncomfortable. Now I know parrots mimic voices. That's what they do. But these weren't phrases she had heard from me, and it wasn't just what she said, it was when she said it. Always at night, always directed at that same vent in the living room. After a few days, I moved her cage into my bedroom. Figured if there was a mouse or something in the wall, she wouldn't have to look at it anymore. She quieted down for a couple nights. Things felt normal again. But then one night, Just after 2 a.m., I woke up to her muttering again. This time she was facing the closet. And what she said, "He's coming." She repeated it 5, maybe 6 times, in that creepy little sing-song voice parrots use when they're playing. I sat straight up in bed. The room was cold. Too cold. The heat hadn't kicked on like it was supposed to. I wrapped myself in the blanket and walked over to the closet, opened it. Nothing. No smell. No movement. Just darkness. But Olive kept whispering, "He's coming! He's coming! He's coming!" I covered her cage with a towel and sat in bed for the next 2 hours staring at the wall, trying not to lose it. The next morning, I called an HVAC guy. Told him I thought I had rats or maybe something bigger in the walls. He did a full inspection of the ductwork and vents, checked the crawl space under the house, said there was nothing, not even dust buildup. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sleeping well, and Olive kept whispering strange things almost every night, always to the vents, sometimes to the closet, once to the bathroom mirror. It wasn't just random anymore. It felt like she was tracking something. And then one night, she screamed, not chirped, not squawked. She screamed. A high-pitched, blood-curdling sound that I didn't even know parrots could make. It sounded human, like a woman screaming in pain. I ran into the room and ripped the towel off her cage. She was flapping like crazy, wings banging against the bars, eyes locked on the ceiling vent. That's when I heard it too, scraping, coming from the ceiling vent, like metal dragging across a wood. I backed out of the room, slammed the door shut. My heart was going a mile a minute. I didn't sleep that night. Olive didn't either. I called pest control the next morning. This time, I insisted they open the vent system. The guy crawled up into the attic, spent about 30 minutes up there. When he came down, his face was pale. He said there was no sign of animals or bugs, but he found something strange. Stuck inside one of the duct grates, wedged between 2 metal panels, was a small child's bracelet. Plastic beads, purple and yellow, a broken elastic band. He asked if it was mine. I told him no. He shrugged and said it must have been from a previous tenant, but I'd seen the disclosure forms. No kids had lived here before. I asked the landlord later that week, and after some hesitation, she admitted something. She said a tenant had moved out years ago after hearing things in the walls. Said the woman had a breakdown, started talking about voices and cold spots. Eventually left in the middle of the night and never came back for her deposit. I asked if anything had happened in the house before that. She paused, then said, "Not that I know of." But the way she said it didn't sound convincing. That night I made a plan to move out. I started boxing things up the next day. But that evening, while I was eating dinner on the couch, Olive said something that made me go completely cold. She stared at the now empty corner where her cage used to be and whispered, "He lived in the vents." I didn't move. She said it again. "He lived in the vents. He's still there." I left that night. Didn't even pack. I drove to a hotel and stayed with friends until I found a new place across town. I still have Olive. She's happy now, talkative in the usual annoying parrot way. No more strange phrases, no more screaming. But every now and then, she'll hear something outside and stop mid-sentence, and I'll catch her looking at the floor vent in my new apartment, just staring, like she's waiting for it to start again.